Hi, hello everyone. Good evening. Welcome to the first episode of our new series, India Security with Colonel GHR Naidu. And many thanks to the participants present here for joining us today. This is a closed invite only meeting, which is also being broadcasted live in our YouTube channel, where also the audiences are viewing us live right now. The audiences in both the platforms can type in their questions and queries during the webinar, which will be addressed by the end of the meeting. India's security is a completely new topic that we are going to explore and learn more about through the perspectives and insights of Colonel Naidu. Let me begin by introducing you to Colonel Naidu. Colonel Naidu, present here with us, who is also the host of this entire webinar series, is an expert when it comes to defense, safety, and disaster management. Colonel Naidu is a chief consultant of CBRNe Secure India and was a former member of International Civil Service while working as a chief chemical weapons inspector for nearly a decade with OPCW, which also won the Nobel Peace Prize Award in 2013. With more than 45 years of experience in the field of combat engineering, chemical, biological, and radiological, nuclear, and explosive, he also keeps an interest in writing. He is a prolific writer and speaker and has participated in various international and domestic conferences on CBRN security, disaster management, and wrote many articles for CBRNE and CIED related journals worldwide. Being an experienced Army veteran, his personality speaks a lot about discipline, management, and responsibility, and is here today with us to share his thoughts on national security through his perspective. Now, I would like Sir Colonel Naidu to take over the mic and grace us with his thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, Sanchita. Very good evening, everybody. Uh, I'm going to talk to you on a broad perspective on national security. And the aim of my presentation is for general public, to bring in awareness in general public. And some of you are from the defense and security families. This could be a sort of a refresher. Today, we'll try and understand what is national security, various components, important components of national security, try and understand what is national security strategy, and get to know what is the present national security architecture and what are the resources available to the government to able to meet these security threats. Next slide, please. Now let's see a definition of national security. There could be many definitions. So one such definition is basically to secure a nation, including its territory. No, go back, please. No. Yeah, thank you. The territory, citizens, physical assets, economy, environment, and natural resources. In fact, any definition generally includes all these factors. So it is the duty of the government to ensure the national security. And what I have generally observed is there is a lot of confusion and understanding what is safety and security. Now, safety and security are both different, though they complement each other. Now, safety is a condition of being protected from danger, risk, or injury. And security is the state of being free from danger or threat. Now, I'll give you a very simple example so that you understand it better. If you're at your homes and in your bathroom, if you have observed while taking bath, you see the tiles on the wall are smoother than the tile which is under your feet, which is generally rough. So that is to prevent any slipping. So that is what you call a safety measure. Or in a house, you have a whole load of power sockets, 5 ampere, 15 ampere open sockets, and you have a child in the house, you take care that you put dummy plugs on these. So that is a safety measure. Or while cooking, after you finish your cooking on a gas, you try and turn off the gas knob, not only at the stove end, you even bow down and go to the gas cylinder, and at the regulator end also, we turn off the gas. Now that is again a safety measure. In the same house, you have grills to the windows, or you have a steel door outside, or you have a burglar alarm system, or you keep your valuables in a either safe iron box or in a bank. All these are called security measures. So I hope I've been able to a very fine difference between safety and security. And often many people confuse safety with and security. So with this example, hopefully that should be clear for you, safety, security. Next slide, please. Now we're going to talk about major components of national security. There are many components, but we'll today discuss only the major components. The most important component of national security is national defense, either by land, by sea, or from air and space. Now, while in land, we'll have to ensure territorial integrity and more importantly, our national sovereignty. Now, if you recall from our history, we have 800 years of invasions, foreign invasions, and people occupying our nation and did a lot of damage to our culture, demography. And we also had 200 years of the British rule, more of a colony. So we do not want to go through the same 1,000 years of hardships. So preserving national sovereignty is very important. Now coming to the sea, we need to protect our sea lanes to facilitate commercial shipping. We need to protect our island territories. And we also need to protect our sea assets, either in the territorial waters or the exclusive economic zone, or even to the continental shelf. Coming to the air and space, we need to provide a free airspace, free from enemy actions, so that our commercial airlines could operate. And we need to also protect space assets like the satellites and all. Now these days, a lot of countries have developed anti-satellite missiles. So we need to take care of our space assets, especially those very important satellites we have launched for remote sensing, for weather, and for intelligence and defense purposes. Yeah, next slide. The next important component of national security is the internal security, in which the border security is paramount. Now we all know we have about 15,200 kilometers of land border with 7 countries, and some of which is contested. We have 750 kilometers of line of actual control, in Jammu and Kashmir, and we have roughly about 4,000 kilometers bordering Tibet. So these are all contested. We have a dispute on these borders. Therefore, the border security has to ensure the sanctity of our borders, prevent any infiltration, whether it is illegal immigrants or terrorists, and prevent illicit trafficking of drugs or contraband. So border security to take care of 15,200 kilometers of land border. Then we have the coastal security, basically to ensure and control the coastal movements, whether it is the fishing, whether it is any other vessel coming into our territorial waters, it needs to be protected and taken care of. So whether it is the territorial waters, whether it is a contiguous zone, whether it is an exclusive economic zone, or the continental shelf. The UN Conference on Law of Seas of 1982 very clearly states 12 nautical miles as the territorial waters limit. Another 12 nautical from there is a contiguous zone wherein a nation can check any other foreign vessels for any contraband items. Then we have about 200 nautical miles of exclusive economic zone, of which we can explore and take the resources from out of the seabed. And we have roughly 350 kilometers of continental shelf. So the coastal security forms a very important aspect of internal security. Then we have the insurgencies in the northeast. We defeated most of the insurgencies in Manipur, Mizoram, Tripura, and there are certain remnants in Nagaland and in Assam. And we need to win over these and ensure stability of these states and ensure development. So defeating insurgencies is an important aspect of internal security. Then we have the militancy and extremism. You have the left-wing extremists, so-called Red Corridor in the central part of India, the Maoists, and roughly about 160 districts were affected by this left-wing extremism. But luckily, as of now, that's been brought down to roughly about 50 to 60 districts. Then we have the militancy by the separatists in Jammu and Kashmir. and you know, a lot of deployment of the security forces. And we have the terrorists coming from across the border to J&K. And we still remember Mumbai, wherein terrorists came from the sea and created havoc in 2008. And we have some separatist tendencies among some people in Punjab, and we need to take care of that. And next is the rights and social unrest. There are a lot of rights, communal rights, that right, this right, and social unrest on various social issues. And some of them turn violent, and that affects the peace and tranquility in the nation. Yeah, next, please. The next most important is cyber security. That is protecting our cyberspace. And when we talk of cyberspace protection, we have to ensure digital sovereignty. You see, it is a digitalized world these days, and we need to have freedom to operate within the cyberspace and protect itself from external threats like cyber attacks. And we have a whole lot of information systems and the infrastructure which houses these information systems. These need to be protected. And the most important thing is the data protection, whether it is individual data, business data, or security related data, or the intelligence data, or industry related data. This data has to be protected from people stealing it. You should be remembering the cases filed against the Aadhaar card. People have apprehensions that some of the data which is collected would be leaked out to the public for malicious use. So data protection is an important component of cybersecurity. And then we have the information warfare. Now with so many social platforms coming, social networks coming into play, there's a lot of disinformation campaign or what you call fake news, trying to create unrest, hesitation, and concerns to the public. So cybersecurity comes in a big way to prevent the so-called fake news or disinformation of various aspects going on in the world or in the country. The most important next is the IT enabled or IT based operations. I think every part of our lives is now IT enabled operations, whether it is space, whether it is the nuclear, whether it is industries, whether it is operation of the trains or the aircraft, civil airlines, everything is so dependent on IT enabled operations or microprocessor controlled operations. So need to protect these operations from cyber attacks. Otherwise, there's going to be a big chaos. Yeah, next. Critical infrastructure. What is critical infrastructure? Those assets necessary for well-being of a nation. If any of these infrastructure is affected, then it disturb the routine life of a nation and the progress of a nation. Take for example, our space assets, our space programs. We have the atomic energy used for peaceful purposes. We have huge transportation networks, systems, the railways, the ports, the waterways, and the airports. These need to be protected. And we have very huge irrigation projects, whether it is the Bakranangal Dam or Thairi Dam, or you see any other big dam in irrigation projects. These need to be protected. Imagine any of these dams being sabotaged, you're going to be playing havoc with the population. You have observed this happening once in Gujarat, a place called Morvi, when the dam burst and thousands of people got killed. Then we have health infrastructure and many other such critical infrastructure. One could be our energy resources, whether it is the Bombay High or it is the Krishna Basin, oil rigs. These need to be protected from hostile elements. Yeah, next, please. Yeah. Economic security, very important. It forms a very important component, and most of us don't really realize the importance of economic security. Now, those activities which contribute to our gross domestic product are generally which needs to be taken care of and protect against any economic risks. Now, we need to have the freedom of what type of economy we like to have, whether it's a controlled economy, whether it's a free market economy, or it's a global economy. Now, we have seen in a global economy, it has to be give and take. It just can't be give and not take. Now, we have seen some of the Western countries insisting on India opening up its markets, but at the same time, they're not very free to open their labor markets for employment of our professionals. So the government, the nation should have the total freedom of which economy which it would like to adopt. And coming to commerce and industries, trade, we do not want very high trade imbalances. whether it is with the China or whether it is United States, imports are more than exports. So that would create imbalance and reduce our economic growth. So taking care of the trade and industry, we need to provide a level field for all industries and prevent from the sharks taking over industries, the big companies from abroad coming and taking over industries. We need to take care of this. And the financial institutions and markets. The banking system, non-banking financial institutions or corporations need to be protected. A lot of frauds in these banks, a lot of non-performing assets to the tune of 12.5 lakh crores, what people have borrowed money and not paid back to the banks. So obviously it impacts our economy. And we need to protect our markets, whether it is the stock markets or whether the commodity markets, from any manipulations. Then we have the revenue and taxation. We need to ensure our revenue resources or revenue sources are not disturbed or not hampered with or not manipulated with, including the taxation. We have seen people evading tax to huge quantities, and the nation has to take care of such people. Then the currency management, make sure our Indian rupee stays strong, doesn't get too much depreciated, and that affects our economy. So currency management or currency manipulation is an important aspect. Then we have the markets, public markets, wherein we have to protect from dumping, by cheap goods coming either from China or South Korea or whatever nation it is. Therefore, it doesn't affect our domestic production and domestic market. So these are markets of ours, whether it is consumer goods, whether it is retail, whatever it is, these need to be protected from dumping, and we need to have adequate anti-dumping laws to prevent this. Agriculture forms an important aspect of economic security, or it contributes towards a gross domestic product. We need to protect our agriculture and make sure our farmers are secure, their crops are secure, no biological attacks or damage to the crops. Of course, there are natural disasters which nothing can be done to those, but certainly protecting our agriculture, protecting our agricultural produce, and getting a remunerative prices for the farmers is an important aspect of economic security. Then we have frauds and money laundering. You must have been seeing last 5 to 6 years, thousands of crores of frauds and money laundering. And this leads to a parallel economy, what's called the black money. And that is a parallel economy, and it is not good for the nation. Then manipulation of stock markets. We have seen cases, 1992, Harshad Mehta, famous case, and another case about 10 years later, how the people have been manipulating the stock markets. Then we have hostile takeovers. We have very efficient companies like, say, for example, the HDFC. Recently, we read in the newspapers that certain percentage of shares have been purchased by a Chinese company. So we need to protect our companies, especially those companies doing very well, from hostile takeovers. Then we have insolvency and bankruptcy. We have seen a lot of industrialists, corporate business houses taking thousands and thousands of crores of bank loans and suddenly siphoning off these money into shell companies and declaring as insolvent and bankrupt. And we how certain agencies within the nation. Next, please. Energy and natural resources. So we should have a degree of freedom, and to which the nation or its people have access to energy resources, whether it is oil, gas, solar energy, water, metals, and minerals. We have problems with China putting up dams on the Brahmaputra, so that at some stage we may have Brahmaputra very dry soon. So we'll have to protect and ensure that we enjoy these energy and natural resources, and they are freely available for the nation and for the use of the people. Next. National security. A lot of people don't realize it. Now we need to respond to conflicts caused by environmental problems. Take example, water shortages. Even within India, we see a lot of states fighting with each other for sharing of river waters. The same goes international. If at all there's going to be any war in future, it will be for water. So water shortages create a lot of problems. Energy disruptions, supply of fuel, supply of crude oil. If any war in Gulf, obviously disrupt the energy supplies and affects our economy. And then severe climatic changes, whether it is global warming and green gas effects, whatever it needs to be taken care of, and environmental degradation. These in a long term affect not only our agriculture, it affect our economy. Next, please. Political security. Now, protecting sovereignty of the government and political system and democratic process and institution. This is very important. We need a very strong political system. It should not be tampered with, like an attempt was made in 1975. So such things should not be allowed to occur. So we have to protect our political system. We need to protect our election system, democratic process, various institutions, whether it is the parliament, whether it is state assemblies, whether it is the municipal bodies, or whether it is the panchayats, all these democratic institutions and all the constitutional bodies, whether it is a control and Auditor General of India, whether it is a Central Vigilance Commission, all these constitutional bodies need to be protected. And we need a very strong political leadership and political will to lead the nation. So this forms a very important aspect, which a lot of countries do not realize is one of the factors which affects our economic growth is political instability. We have seen for 20 years till I would say 2004, we had a whole lot of political instability and the nation did not grow much. And there was a time when we are pledging our gold, to be able to sustain and payment our loans. So that should not happen. We need a very strong willpower. We have seen recently after the episode in the Eastern Ladakh, how the Prime Minister has shown his determination and willpower and given a very strong leadership. So political security leadership, it doesn't matter which party comes to power, but it's more important. The national interests are paramount for them. And we need to protect this democratic process and elections. We can't afford to delay these elections. We can't afford to delay the formation of the governments. So this is important. Yeah, next. Thank you. Human security, very important. Otherwise, it leads to a lot of unrest. So human security related to health, education, housing, employment, food, women, protection of women and children, minorities and the downtrodden, and prevent repressions, both state repression and also repression from so-called lords, the mafias and the dons who exist in various cities in India. So we have for that, we have what is called the Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme, we have the Food Security Act, we have the right to education, and a whole lot of facilities under the health, a lot of schemes which have been announced by the government. These are an essential part of economic security or the national security, and these need to be taken care of. Next, please. Now we'll come to what's called national security strategy. Now, in simple terms, it says what are the threats, how do we deal with these threats, and who is going to deal with these threats. That's what, in nutshell, what the national security strategy is. Sometimes this terminology is totally misused by our media, and they don't really understand what is strategy, and they don't understand what is operational or tactics. Now, what the national security strategy outlines is major security concern and how the government plans to deal with them. So you should identify the threats or security threats and come out with a solution how to deal with them and who is going to deal with this. Now, from out of the national security strategy, we'll evolve some sub-strategies, whether it is related to the defense strategy, internal security strategy, the cyber security strategy, the economic strategy, and the energy strategy. So base document for any national security is a national security strategy, from which will evolve the other sub strategies, and should have goals that are very clear, achievable, and mutually reinforcing. Now, this national security strategy is put up in form of a document, which is issued for a period of 5 years. period of time, say 5-year period or 10-year period, and it is revised periodically based on the security environment around, and it needs to be revised and could contain a working definition of what is national security and what are the national security objectives. Then an appreciation of the emerging security environment, taking into account the geopolitical changes in the world and also political or in an internal environment. Then an assessment of our strengths and weaknesses dealing with these challenges. So we should know, check an audit of what are our strengths and weaknesses in dealing with the challenges. And then identify military, economic, diplomatic resources which need to meet up these challenges. This is in nutshell what is a national security strategy. And unfortunately, after 70 years of our independence, we still do not have any national security strategy or a document. There was one document prepared by the National Security Advisory Board about 3 years back, but that was again thrown into the dustbin. I don't know why no importance has not been given. Then we formed what is called a Defense Planning Committee, which was mandated to prepare a national security strategy. And it was formed in year 2018, and already 2 years passed, and we don't see any light of this so-called National Security Strategy document. Next. Now, what should be the security strategy object? It could be anything. They are not sacrosanct. I just listed some of those things. Now, we'll be able to, our strategy should be that we should be able to play an effective role in both global and regional affairs. That's very important. And we have reached that stage, both militarily, economically, and diplomatically. We are in a state that we could have an effective role, whether it is regional wise or even globally, we have been recognized. So the first objective is that we should be so strong enough in all forms so that we are looked up for playing a positive and effective role in global and regional affairs. Then we also look for achieving a secure neighborhood. You can't have your neighbor's house on fire and you can't sit pretty with that. It obviously someday affects your house. So therefore, you need to have a very secure neighborhood, which the last government and the present government have tried to do. But unfortunately, we have been having some setbacks recently. But I am sure we'll overcome these through our efficient diplomacy. Then we need to protect and defend our territorial integrity and national sovereignty of the country, which I did mention in my first slide. This is very important, national sovereignty. We do not want to go back to those 800 years under occupation of various invaders who came from the West, Turkey, Afghanistan, Iran, and there were forced conversions to religious conversions, destruction of our cultural monuments and religious monuments. So we don't want that to happen. So it has to be a very important objective of territorial integrity. We don't want anybody's territory. We want what is our territory. We have a right to defend it and ensure it. And same goes for national sovereignty. Then we need to have a peaceful resolution of internal conflicts, whether it is insurgencies, whether it is a militancies, whether it is a left-wing extremism. We need to have resolution, resolve them peacefully. And we have what is called interstate councils in the Ministry of Home Affairs. The very purpose of these interstate councils is that we bring the states together, whether it is a sharing of river waters, whether it is, even a present pandemic, there's a lot of disagreement between states. One state said nobody will be allowed, and one state said I will send these guys, and poor migrants suffered a lot. So there has to be a peaceful resolution of internal conflicts. Then protecting our people is paramount. People are a nation. So they need to be protected. And then we need to strengthen our capabilities in all respects, economic capabilities, financial, military, diplomatic, in all aspects, we need to really strengthen our capabilities, because a strong nation, like the Prime Minister the other day mentioned, we don't talk of peace being weak. We talk of peace being strong. When you're strong, then we can talk of peace. When you're weak, nobody will listen to you. So therefore, strengthening our capabilities is very important. Then we need to protect our core values of the nation as enshrined in the Indian Constitution. We should all be very proud that we are the world's largest democracy. 70 years, regular elections, various parties, diversity, pluralistic society we have. So we need to protect our values, especially the fundamental rights, the fundamental duties, and freedom of speech, freedom of actions. These need to be protected as So this has to be a very important objective of the national security strategy. And lastly, ensuring socio-economic development of the country. That's obvious. Until and unless you develop socially, it's just not only economically, we need to develop socially also. There are a lot of wrong beliefs, blind beliefs. So we need to really bring up socially and also economically and ensure the nation develops on these lines. Yeah, next please. Let's what is the present national security apparatus in India? What as it exists, as updated. So we have at the national level, we have what is called the Cabinet Committee on Security, which is a subcommittee of the cabinet, which are the Home Minister, the Defense Minister, the Finance Minister, and the Minister of External Affairs, and headed by the Prime Minister. Similar to what is called the CCS, that is the Cabinet Committee on Security, we have the National Security Council, which also has an additional member is the Vice Chairman of the Niti Aayog, and the National Security Council is, the Secretary of this Council is the National Security Advisor, who happens to be Mr. Ajit Doval presently. Now, because CCS meets very frequently, the National Security Council of late has become more or less defunct. It's not really meeting. It's unfortunate because if you see the membership of the CCS and the National Security Council is more or less the same, leaving aside the Vice Chairman of the Niti Aayog. Now, when the CCS meets, it invites a lot of specialists, whether it is the Chief of Defense Staff, whether the Army Services Chiefs, whether it is the intelligence chiefs, or whether it is about something with the finance or economy. These people are called in to assist and guide and help with the information and the data for the CCS to take a decision. Now, under the National Security Advisor, we have 3 Deputy National Security Advisor, each of them looking after some specialized tasks given to them, various subjects. And then we also have a military advisor who, all these 4 people are part of what is called the National Security Council Secretariat. It's called the NSC Secretariat, and it is headed by Ajit Doval. And then we have 4 organs, or 5 organs or entities which is forming part of the architecture. The most important being the Strategic Policy Group. Again, the chairman of this group is the National Security Advisor. We have the Cabinet Secretary, we have the 3 chiefs, service chiefs, now the Chief of Defense Staff, and we have the Defense Secretary, Home Secretary, Foreign Secretary. We have people coming from the finance, we have the RBI governor, we have the space, atomic energy, the DRDO representatives, and we're going to talk about what is the function of this so-called strategic policy group. It's a very important decision. I wouldn't say decision making. They prepare for documents for the National Security Council or the Cabinet Committee on Security to take decisions. Then we also have what's called the National Security Advisory Group. It's a 10-member body which is nominated every 2 years, and which generally meets for at least once a month, maybe more if it need be. And this contains people who are out of the government, those specialists, whether from the military, whether the foreign affairs, intelligence, or the economic field, or the legal field. These people form part of the National Security Advisory Group, and they have a particular function which we're going to cover subsequently. And we have the Defense Planning Committee, which was raised in 2018, headed by again the National Security Advisor. We have the Chief of Defense Staff and the Service Chiefs, and a host of other secretaries, relevant departments, who are basically to do what's called a long-time defense planning and procurement. Then we have the Joint Intelligence Committee, which analyzes the intelligence supplied by the Research and Analysis Wing, which is the external intelligence body. We have the Intelligence Bureau, we have the National Technical Research Organization, and we have the military, air, and naval intelligence. So the intelligence which is collected by these all these bodies, which are analyzed, and a very comprehensive document by the JSC is put up to the Prime Minister each night, and also the concerned ministers and the representatives. Then we also recently, last couple of years, have what's called a National Cyber Coordinator. We do not have a specific organization to fight cyber attacks, unfortunately. Each of the entities, whether it is Army, Air Force, Navy, Armed Forces, whether it is the police, whether it is the business houses, whether it is the government bodies, each of them they have what certain elements to take care of national cyber attacks or cyber security. So there needs to be a coordinator. It can't be free for all. So there is a national cyber coordinator who works under one of the deputy national security advisors, and he also forms part of the Prime Minister's office. Now he is in limelight these days. Last week or 2 weeks back, we've seen in the news that cyber attacks, thousands of attacks by the Chinese on our systems. So he is coming to play, and hopefully someday we're going to have an exclusive organization to take care of cyber attacks or cyber security. Next slide, please. Now, I did mention those 4 organs. Now, strategic policy group, which generally takes defense review, strategic defense review, and prepares a blueprint for long-term security threats, as well as policy options on a priority basis. So they are the ones who probably possible policy options which then put up to the CCS or the National Security Council for acceptance or approval. Then I did mention of the National Security Advisory Board, eminent national security experts from outside the government. They meet at least once a month. It could be more times. And they provide long-term prognosis or analysis to the National Security Council and recommend solutions and address policy issues referred to it. So they address issues on their own, and some are referred to it to come out with some solutions for the National Security Council. Then I did mention about a joint intelligence committee analyzing the data provided by the Intelligence Bureau, RAW, military, naval, air, and also National Technical Research Organization, both domestic and foreign intelligence. And Defense Planning Committee making a comprehensive planning for defense forces, focusing on military doctrines and ways to deal with emerging security challenges for India. Now, what do we have? Next slide, please. Now, what are the resources available at the disposal of the government to deal with national security or national security threat? We have the Indian Armed Forces, roughly 1.5 million armed forces. We have the border and coast guarding forces. We have the BSF, we have the ITBP, we have the Sashastra Seema Bal SSB looking after the Nepali and Bhutanese border. We have the Assam Rifles taking care of the Myanmar border. And we have the Central Armed Police Forces, specifically the Central Reserve Police Force, which has got roughly about 243 battalions. And we have this Central Industrial Security Force, which you must have seen at the airports doing the security checks. And they also protect our industries and critical infrastructure. Then we have the external, internal, and technical intelligence agencies, whether it is the RAW, whether it is the IB, whether it is the NTRO. In addition to these, we have a lot of intelligence agencies related to economic intelligence, revenue intelligence, part of the, what do you call the Ministry of Finance. So they are also, intelligence, even income tax has got its own intelligence thing to try and find out and get information on, possible tax evaders and also money laundering. Then we have cyber security and information warfare organization. At least the armed forces are well geared. We have a centralized center, cyber security or cyber division. We have the space division. We have the information warfare division in the armed forces. And not very sure whether other departments have the similar. Like I told you earlier, that we need to have a very huge centralized organization to take care of cyber security and also information warfare. Then we have the state police. We have the state police special branch which deals with intelligence. We have economic offenses wing in form part of the crime branch. Then we have law enforcement agencies are also first responders like the fire and the civil defense. The next important resource we have is diplomatic, very successful diplomacy. And our diplomats have really did us very proud. They always were at the beck and call of the nation. So we have huge diplomatic corps, and we have been very successful diplomatically. And this is an important resource which has to be used, like military, diplomacy, intelligence, and economy. These are 4 aspects which one should concentrate. And we have investigation agencies like the Central Bureau of Investigation. We have the National Intelligence Agency. We have the what is called the Enforcement Directorate, to prevent money laundering, be the income tax, certain investigations, and and we have the serious fraud investigation organization on the Ministry of Corporate Affairs, which prevents corporate fraud. Then we have space, atomic energy, DRDO, CSIR, ICMR, ICR, and a whole lot of research organizations. And thanks to space and organization, we have satellites getting us a lot of help and giving us a lot of help and information. Next most important is leveraging of technology. Technology, the nation which is technologically advanced is certainly in a better position to take care of national security. So we need to really harp on technology. We develop technologically, we are very sound and safe. So leveraging technology is an important resource which the nation should utilize. Then we have the Customs and Narcotic Control Board prevent illicit trafficking of drugs and contraband. And we have, I did mention, the RBI, which regulates the banking system. And recently we have also seen the RBI taking over the cooperative banks very rightly, because these are all big institutions for fraud and deceit. So the RBI comes in a big way. The regular auditing by the Controller and Auditor General helps in preventing such frauds and thereby saving a lot of protecting our economy. And we have financial institutions which could help us as the resources, whether it is a banking system, insurance, or with the non-banking financial corporation. And we have the environmental protection agencies, the national green tribunals at various benches set up to make sure the environment is protected, the coastal protection, the forests protection, these are all taken care by the NGT. And we have the repositories of various resources, both energy and natural resources, whether it is the ONGC or the Oil India, in the hydrocarbon sector, we have mineral sector, the various repositories. So all these resources are available. And lastly, a huge industry, manufacturing industry and service industries. In fact, service industries, overtake the manufacturing industry in terms of gross incomes. So these are all the national resources available for national security. This brings me to end of my presentation. So Sanchita, I am open for any questions. You did receive some questions, so I will be ready to answer them.
Yes, sir. Thank you for the wonderful explanation. It was really very insightful. There are quite a few questions that we received.
Okay.
Am I audible, sir?
Yes, please.
Yeah. One of the question is, how far have our defense research labs and PSUs met our defense needs?
Okay. You see, we, even after 70 years, we import 70% of our defense needs equipment. So that says for itself how the DRDO or the ordnance factories or the defense public sector undertakings are playing a role. But notwithstanding that, there are great achievements from the DRDO in the field of integrated missile development program. We are a missile power now, thanks to our great scientists in the DRDO. But there are also failures like the main battle tank, where the light combat aircraft, the main battle tank of 1980s, which was initiated in 70s, was to be provided to the services in 1980s. And today is 2020. Now we got, of course, Arjun tank, which meets 60% of our qualitative requirement, what's called the general staff qualitative requirements. So there are disappointing areas, but there are very successful areas from the DRDO. Now coming to the ordnance factories, I would very frankly say it's been a disappointment. They haven't really innovated or changed technologically. We still have ordnance factories making soaps for bathing, bath soaps. We don't need an ordnance factory to make soap. The soap is made at an ordnance factory at Barakpur and sent for storage to some ordnance depot in Punjab, traveling all the way one soap cake, and then being supplied to a unit which is probably 100 kilometers away from Barakpur. So a very inefficient way. So ordnance factories, of late, they have come up with very nice gun system. They're 155 millimeter towed gun system. So there are some good areas where ordnance factories, but certainly it's not up to the mark. And very rightly, the government has now decided to form a corporation of ordnance factories. and remove some unnecessary units. So most of the equipment which is ordnance factories is way back of Second World War vintage. There's no improvement, no technological development. Of course, there are some nice modern factories also. Now, coming to the public sector undertakings, defense public sector undertakings, we have very good success stories from the shipbuilding side, whether it is the Goa shipyard or the Mazagon docks or the Garden Reach workshop or the Hindustan shipyard at Vishakhapatnam. They did wonders as far as the shipbuilding goes. And we also have Bharat Dynamics Limited, which is producing our missiles. We have the Bharat Earth Movers Limited and the Bharat Electronics Limited. Now, Bharat Electronic Earth Movers Limited was initially started specifically for the defense purposes, but of late it is diversified into various other areas, including making of rail coaches for the metro. So I would say it's a mixed reaction. DRDO has got some success stories, but the fact that we are after 70 years importing 70% of our need, especially weapons, aircraft, submarines, aircraft carriers, tanks, name it, we're still importing. But now last 4 to 5 years with this Make in India policy and so-called, we are trying to build up our domestic military industrial complexes, brought in private parties, and they're hopefully, there is always a gestation period. They can't produce overnight. So they take about 5 to 6 years to produce goods, and it is a step in the right direction. So I hope that answers the question.
There are many questions. We will try to merge it in a single question. So the other question is, in order to curb lockdown in this COVID situation, many citizens were demanding the involvement of army in it. What is your take on it?
See, I'm quite surprised actually. See, people have great faith in armed forces, and I'm very happy and proud of that. So every problem which the nation face, the first thing they look to the army. And we are as good or as bad as dealing with COVID as central police forces or anybody else. The only thing is the armed forces function a very systematic and very committed in their tasks, whether it is flood relief or earthquake relief, disaster relief. So that is the basically reflection of the faith of the nation in its armed forces. Otherwise, the armed forces, we have excellent medical corps which takes care of taking care of the patients. So that could be one of the reasons why people are asking for, and of course, the commitment which the armed forces show compared to other organizations in the government. So we are very happy about it, and we have no problem in if sometime the government would like to utilize the services of the armed forces.
So the other question is, there is this new post recently created by the government of India, which is Chief of Defense Staff. How do you think that will be of any benefit?
Yes, that's of a great benefit. Actually, we have waited 70 years, and each time the governments come in and they say there's no political consensus to appoint a chief of defense staff. This has been the demand in most developed countries. We have what is called the chief of defense staff, who is actually the single point reference or advice to the government on matters military, on defense related matters. So luckily now, thanks to the government, we now have the chief of defense staff, but it is not in a form what we desired. There was always, manipulations. So even the present CDS, of course, it's much better than not having one. It helps a lot in coordination and also jointness between the three services. Otherwise, each of the services will try and operate in their own way, but there needs need for synergy and economy of resources. We need to have a jointness between the three services, and chief of defense staff is a welcome thing, and I do hope that's going to help, and we are very in fact confident that's going to help the nation.
So the last question that we can answer is, because we are short in time, which is, many of the threats, including terrorism, insurgencies, border security, etc., are repetitive in nature as seen from a broad spectrum. Can automation be done using digital techniques to prevent them?
Yeah, let me tell. Actually, people have a misnomer that armed forces or the central paramilitary forces really operate in a very primitive way. No, we are very advanced in our technology, whether it is automation, whether it is data analytics or the artificial intelligence. We are well advanced. Of course, there's much to do in these aspects. And just automation doesn't help, but certainly it helps in data analysis and coming to a decision making, or what you call the decision support systems. Certainly helps. We are in a big way modernizing both, not only the armed forces, including the central paramilitary forces, are modernizing and trying to go in for information enabled, IT enabled operations. And it certainly is a very good suggestion, and that does help. And we are in the way of in a big way adopting that.
Okay, thank you so much, sir. Your words will truly be of the value, because with the experience you have, we are honored to have you with us as our host, and we
Thank
look
you.
forward to learn from you every day.
Thank
And
you.
thank you so much to the audience. I
Thank
hope
you.
you have enjoyed this session.
Thank you.
This series of webinar is actually an initiative by the experts to create general awareness on safety and security, and will be broadcasted under SAPIO umbrella, which will be conducted every fortnight. So I hope to see you all on our next episode on the 23rd of July as well. Until then, goodbye and
But
thank you.
Ashwin, I think, has got to say something. I was told Ashwin was wanting to say something.
Yes, Colonel.
Yes,
Yeah, I'll probably take a minute. So yeah, it's been pleasure listening to you first and understanding various aspects of national security. From my side, I just wanted to kind of emphasize the point which you mentioned at the last around the importance of data in in intelligence and in the entire concept of national security today. So that's it. I just wanted to give the listeners the simple thought that I was just going through some data points recently. Today we have got around 44 zettabytes of data in this small world of ours. So just to give you the context, this is equivalent to 40 times more number of bytes, 40 times more bytes than there are number of stars in the universe, entire universe. So you can just imagine the amount of data which is out there floating in this small world of ours. And all of this data which is floating out there can be tabbed and can be a major part in the in the in national security, in intelligence in general. So that's what I want to just quickly say. And there's a lot of work which is going on in that aspect on our side. So yeah, this is for the listeners if they would like to connect with us for this.
Okay, I would like to thank Ashwin, Hardik, and Sanchita, and also Kritika for your great support. And we have our next session on 23rd of July on CBRNe threats. And every fortnight you're going to see my face. Thank you very much for your patience, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.
thank you so much, everyone. With this, we come to an end of this episode. We'll see you in our next episode.